Hi friends and welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, hello. My name's George Agambar and I'm a UK music producer. Today the British music industry started petitioning the government for more support during the coronavirus pandemic. As a producer, musician and supporter of live music, I wanted to share my thoughts on this and about how we can adapt to continue working in this situation whilst protecting others and not encouraging the transmission of the virus. And things will never be the same when I hear your name since you kissed me in the rain. So first, just a quick overview of the problem as I see it. The coronavirus is a family of viruses ranging from the common cold to the more serious SARS. They're spread by droplet or by touch to the mucous membranes, such as our eyes, nose and mouth. So what's so different about COVID-19? The virus is highly infective. Really infective. If I had the seasonal flu, I would expect to infect about 1.3 people. Those 1.3 people can then go on and infect another 1.3 people. After 10 cycles, 14 people would then have the flu. The coronavirus is different. Instead of 1.3 people, it's 3 people on average. So after the same 10 cycles, it's not 14 people that have been infected, it's 59,000 people. It's really infective. It's also really sneaky. It can be asymptomatic or it can present you with some really odd symptoms. And its long-term effects are pretty horrible. It can cause some lung damage, which really isn't great for singers, tiredness, post-viral fatigue, and in the worst cases, death. So it's really something that we have to take very, very seriously. So where are we now with the virus in the UK? Initially, our government really focused on not overwhelming our health service, so we went into lockdown. And for the UK and most parts of Europe, this seemed to be broadly successful. Now the government's focus is restoring our economy and getting people back to work, avoiding crippling furlough payments, which will result in increasing taxes or government borrowing. So the next step is trying to encourage the public to behave in a way that won't cause a second spike of the virus, whilst still giving them a degree of normality back in their lives. This is a holding measure until there's a vaccine available or there is a wider degree of herd immunity. So the government have introduced a track and trace system to isolate potential contacts, and local lockdowns are being enforced to deal with outbreaks. So why is the music industry up in arms about this? Well, the main risk of transmission is crowds, and music crowds possibly being the worst. Strangers, many of whom can be asymptomatic, droplets when people are shouting or singing, and add alcohol to the equation. And then add all this into indoor spaces, pubs, clubs, small music venues, and the risk of transmission is really high. And what if your band gets exposed to the virus? Every member will then have to self-isolate for 2 weeks. And for people who have full-time jobs in the day, this really doesn't become worth it. Pretty much everything is screaming, don't have live music just yet. So right now in the UK, we've been told there's no live music indoors or outdoors, no music at weddings, and no recorded music to be played in venues that will encourage people to speak louder than a conversational volume. Social distancing is being enforced, and we've been advised by our Prime Minister to stay 2 metres away from other people, and if that's not possible, to stay at least 1 metre away from somebody else and to wear a mask. Track and trace has also been introduced and will enforce self-isolation for 2 weeks if you have been in close proximity with someone for 15 minutes who has tested positive for coronavirus. There has been talk of allowing bands to play behind a screen, but the reality is that they'll still have to stay at least 1 metre apart from each other whilst they're on stage, and so only really large venues can accommodate for this. Shows in larger venues have been postponed until 2021, where hopefully the risk will have decreased. And all major festivals are being cancelled at the moment, although some are being broadcast to us, such as the proms. What can we do? Well, we can mitigate the effects and start thinking creatively. For example, can music venues be repurposed as schools, which would desperately need the space as of September? Pubs will need the support of their clientele now more than ever. But they'll have to think of other attractions to bring in the customers, such as food, educational talks, quizzes, food, more quizzes, more food. Nightclubs are unlikely to be the same, but they could begin to introduce a testing regime of everyone that enters the club. They could register everyone that enters the club, and they could get people to sign a waiver upon entry. We can help by having faith in our venues and not asking for refunds on the tickets we've bought so that we don't bankrupt them. And what can we do for ourselves? As musicians, we really need to start thinking about our revenue streams. and embracing technology will be a huge part of this. Live streaming practice sessions or even gigs may be the new way of watching music and supporting local bands. And there is an opportunity to create a revenue through this. You can ask for donations via PayPal. P.S. This video is not sponsored by PayPal. Session work could also be a really useful way of generating some income. But musicians could really take this time and opportunity to educate themselves. We could learn more about the industry we're in, we could learn a different aspect of the industry, and we could write more and build our portfolios. This is just talking about the full-time musicians. For us part-time musicians, as sad as it is to say, but gigging might not be worth it. We've got to decide whether we want to be a part of the problem or the solution. And the reality is that when we go out to gig, we're creating more problems than it's actually worth. But what about those of us who are home producers? At the moment, or initially, it seems like we've been hit less hard than a gigging musician. But that means that we need to take the time and recognise that we need to support these artists that are struggling to ensure that there are still artists in the future. We may have to sacrifice a little bit now to ensure our long-term survival. And as home producers, we're quite lucky. We're quite used to working remotely and often in complete isolation. Online working and remote recording are already well established. What we can do better is advertise our services and seek collaborations with artists and think about the way we generate our incomes. Maybe it would be better for us at the moment to ask for a share of the royalties rather than an upfront payment, as this would also help support the artists. So how about recording studios? Studios are likely to continue working, but may have a lower volume of work coming through their doors due to distancing rules. So how can they adapt? They may consider longer opening times, or perhaps renting out a room to a home producer who might want a good listening environment to work on their projects in. Outsourcing suitable projects to engineers who can work remotely may also be a really good idea from a studio's perspective, as it can free up studio space and time for recording purposes. And this is a huge opportunity for studios to really hone their practice and make sure that there is as little wasted recording time as there can possibly be, which will be hugely beneficial and cost efficient for artists in the future. Our music industry has been hit hard, and we certainly need to support it as much as we can, but practices will need to change. We have to accept that possibly for the next 1 to 2 years, life isn't going to be as we know it. And we do need support from the government. But we also need to think about how we can reimagine our venues, our performances and our careers in the short to medium term. I don't think that the coronavirus story is yet over for music, and I think that to return to normal, we are going to have to sacrifice some of the things we love about music. The shared experience and closeness to our fellow human beings, the friendships and the joy will return. We just need to be patient for the time being and to support each other. Thank you so much for watching my video, and I would love to know your thoughts on the whole situation down in the comments. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell, and I will see you all again very soon.